Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program this evening. It promises to be another exciting one for a number of reasons, and we're going to reveal that as we go on in the program. Prof, you are welcome to the program again this evening.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you to our viewers from all continents in the world. Again, I'm happy to be here with you. I've been looking forward to this Thursday issue, and I hope you will find it as exciting as I am going to.
Excellent. Prof, there is a saying we have here. We say, I spy with my little eye. And I can spy something in the corner with my little eye. Prof, we'll talk about what we can see in the corner later.
Okay.
But let us start, Prof, with Australia. Let's go to Australia. Last week we talked about, or the week before, we talked about Australia and the face-off that's going on with China. Now, one of the things that we've seen Australia start to do is now turn to the WTO and trying to look for some support from the WTO against the issues that they're having with China. Prof, this seems to be highlighting exactly what you were talking about when we discussed the Australia and China face-off. Do you think this is the right thing for Australia?
No, if we define right in the sense of producing results that Australia that will be beneficial to Australia. WTO is like the United Nations. It's made up of its members, and an international organization is like animal farm. Some animals are more equal than others. And there's no doubt that at WTO, China, the United States, Russia, Great Britain, the European Union are all more powerful than the rest of us, including Australia. And even though Australia can count on support from the United States and I suppose Great Britain, because of their Commonwealth ties and the old colonial ties. But that's about as much as it will go. China itself is there to protect its own interests, and presumably China can look in the direction of Russia to come to its aid. So that kind of gets a balancing game done. And since things are usually done by consensus rather than like it's not, WTO is not like the General Assembly of the United Nations where you could achieve results by majority vote, especially on an issue like this, a confrontation between Australia and China. So I don't believe it's going to yield result. It will draw attention and put it on a global scale, but the United States actually unilaterally can provide more protection and more results for whatever it is that Australia wants.
Prof, the G7 summit is taking place in the United Kingdom, where we are here. What do you expect to come out of that, Prof?
Well, it's called the G7, but of course, there are going to be guest members. And so, if you will pardon me, let me start with that issue. Representing Africa, so to speak, is South Africa. Now, Nigeria's economy is the largest in Africa. That is in spite of the fact that Nigeria is so disorganized. It still has the largest economy. So you can imagine what that economy will be if we got our acts together. So, by what yardstick do you then invite South Africa and not Nigeria? If you want to talk in terms of, the largest GDP, it is Nigeria. So let me just put that on the table, and we can push it aside, since we are talking about the G7 and not BRICS, which I haven't heard much about BRICS, incidentally. From the G7, I'm expecting them to address basically the issue of re-energizing the democratic countries of the world. I am looking, frankly, that is the main issue. Provides an opportunity for United States, which has kept saying US is back. It is back to re-energize the democratic countries. To me, it is not back to achieve the results which, on issues which I'm afraid the Western media has been concentrating upon. How are you going to achieve results on COVID-19 when China is not there, when Russia is not there? How are you going to achieve any positive results on climate, the environment, when again these other countries are not there? So you could say, yes, it will come into play in formulating Western positions. But I'm afraid the age is long gone when Western positions represent universal positions. So to that extent, I think really this particular G7 summit is perhaps more to repair the damage done by the former President Trump, show the new face of the United States, and hope that you could then hold that position for the next 4 years. But even on that issue, there is a but. The European countries will be asking the United States, what guarantee can you give us that after the next 4 years, things are not going to change in the United States? What guarantee are you going to give us? Some, while they will be too polite to raise it, may in fact, maybe over dinner, over a glass of champagne or that kind of thing, tell President Biden that actually they are not comfortable with the way he's allowing the Republicans in the Senate to box him into a corner. After all, they are also listening to what is happening in the United States Senate. Last week, the Republicans refused to come on board on what should have been a bipartisan commission on the events of from uh, January 6th. And there was nothing President Biden was able to do about it. I mean, uh, I, that is coming to me as a surprise. The infrastructural bill is getting stuck, and there are, you know, there are sniffles coming out even of the Senate that there are Democrats who are getting ready to make a deal with the Republicans on the major issues, and that the liberal Democrats are actually getting rather worried and frustrated about what they are starting to see as some Democrats wanting to do deals with the Republicans. You'll recall in November last year, I did one on this program that each time there is a liberal victory in the United States, somehow the conservatives have managed to snatch that victory from the Democrats. And now it is the liberal Democrats who are starting to scream that this is not, that yes, they don't, that they have one, one majority if the vice president votes along with them. And why are they playing as if it is the Republicans who have that one majority? There is a process in place where you can use that one victory to get on with your program and face the consequences at election time. In Europe, some European leaders also will be keeping an eye at this and saying to Mr. Biden, what kind of America is really back, and how long can we count on the United States? The United States we are used to being back, uh, uh, whether in 2 years' time when you have midterm elections, which if the Republicans capture the Senate, then forget any program coming out of Biden. So, hello, how are you? Old boys shaking hands, slapping backs. Nice to see you again. I suppose we cannot ask for more, and I will not expect more than this coming out of the summit.
Prof, one thing that we're seeing is just before President Biden left the United States, we saw Vice President Harris going out to Mexico on her first foreign visit as well. And we see something similar going on here where she's committed millions and millions of dollars to development in Mexico and was really asking for Mexicans to stay in Mexico, don't come to the United States. First of all, Prof, how did she do on her first trip?
Well, I don't think she did badly, given the cards she can only play with. What she's tried to do, which has been done by Bush, even by Obama, is to try and throw money at a problem. Now, you continue to do the same thing at the same issue, and you're expecting different results, you are not going to get the different results, I'm afraid, because throwing money at the issue of immigrants, you have no control over the government agencies in the Latin American countries. And apart from the structural problems of governance that you have in that country, you also have the problem of militia, especially at the grassroots, intervening in how funds are used, how they are distributed. I don't want to call it corruption, but basically that's what it is. So you really cannot guarantee that that money will get down to the grassroots to create jobs so that those young people who need jobs can stay there. A lot of the people, of the immigrants who are coming to the United States, are actually running away from terrorism, domestic terrorism in their country, ruled by the militia at the grassroots. And that will still be there with American money or without. Now, this is a season of elections in one or two South American countries, and you've had multiple candidates, even people running for mayor, even people running for councillorship, being killed, not waiting for even the elections to be held. And that includes Mexico itself. So what will have changed between Obama and now that the money will make a difference? But then maybe that the Biden administration needs to be seen as doing something. They need to be seen as doing something. There was an election held in, I believe it was Florida, one of the little counties in Florida, where Biden had carried during the presidential elections. And the Republicans defeated the Democratic candidate for the mayor in that county. And the observers feel that it's all because the electorate feel that Biden was messing up on the immigration issue, and that it doesn't seem to have a firm control on the issue. So now they want to be seen as doing something, but what they are doing, not their fault. Frankly, I don't know what any American president can do on the immigration issue. I don't see it. That border is so wide open. People are desperate to leave Latin America. You think about it. What must a mother be going through in Guatemala that she puts a 10-year-old son or girl alone and tells him or her to get on and join the group trooping to the United States? They must be so desperate. And I'm not too sure that, giving money at the central level and hope it will trickle down is going to solve the issue.
Prof, on the other side, what we've then seen is President Biden in the United Kingdom just today has been talking about donating 500 million doses of a vaccine. And some have said this is a stance to assert American leadership. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. In the sense that that is a humongous amount of vaccine um, um, to offer, to donate. See, we should always be careful about hearing the actual words being used. What's the time frame for that amount of vaccine that will be used? Before, is it in 90 days? Before the end of the year? And more often than not, Western countries, including the United States, of course, make offers before you then find out that those offers are contingent on so many conditionalities that you are not hearing when they are talking about, we will donate this, we will donate that. Of course, some people say, why not donate 1 billion? You could do it, and not just half a billion doses. But whatever it is, okay, that's one thing on the table. Let's see what Europe will seek to put on the table to measure up. But this is the kind of thing the United States can do because of its economic capability, scientific capability. But there is still that issue on with the intellectual copyright so that countries in the developing countries who have the capability to make vaccines can actually make the vaccines and not be dependent on receiving donations. I would like to see American leadership on that issue of waiving intellectual copyright.
Prof, before we leave Europe, there was a scene we saw in the course of the week, which was shocking for many, and that was the slapping of the French Macron uh, by some of the people he was greeting. And that has raised quite a lot of concerns for some people to say, to what extent do people do those sorts of things? And maybe to an extent get away with them. And what are your views on what happened there, Prof?
Well, we've had COVID-19 pandemic. We've had vaccine diplomacy. We're now going to be having, we've had virtual diplomacy. Are we now going to have slap in the face diplomacy? In terms of, the effect of this on the stature of President Macron. What I'm worried, a lot of things I'm worried about over that issue. One is the copycat syndrome. This haven't happened and haven't been seen globally, worldwide. Would there be some nuts hanging around the corner to, take a punch or throw a punch, even if it doesn't land in the direction of any of these heads of states who will be having meetings, all over the world. It must create nightmares for the security men who have to take care of them. And hopefully the security men will step up their game in protection of the people they are supposed to protect. Now, the second issue is effect on the stature of Macron. You see, Macron has, I mean, well, I'm assuming, we still don't know, nobody has told us whether the man who threw the punch is a Frenchman or not. But Macron has been frankly batting above the stature of France in terms of world diplomacy. But this is what every French president has been doing since the time of Napoleon Bonaparte. They want to forget that Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo. They want you to forget that First World War, the Germans defeated France. Second World War, France was actually occupied by Germany, and it took the intervention of the Americans and the British before France was liberated. They want you to forget all of that by trying to play this global role that will rival the Americans or rival Germany or rival Great Britain. Macron has also tried to do that. And one just wonders whether that slap in the face has not diminished him to some extent. So we are all happy that it was not more than that. We're all happy that he went on with the ceremony, if one could call it that, because you see, presidential elections are coming next year in France, and he will still want to be seen as not being frightened of meeting the electorate. That it was
Prof,
because yes.
are you saying that he was right in continuing that? Because surely his security services should have been reassessing the risk.
Yes, but I think it was the right call for him to continue. I would do that because he couldn't afford to be seen to be frightened. No, you are the president of the republic. You must show courage. You must show that you are prepared for any eventuality. So he was right to continue.
One other thing, Prof, that we see about President Macron is they're talking about changing the working language of the EU from next year. Now, if they succeed in doing that, what effect is that going to have on diplomacy?
How could it succeed? I mean, France doesn't control the EU. If I think the Germans have gotten over the syndrome of the Second World War. In terms of the economy, the German economy is bigger than that of the French. And frankly, one French president, I can't remember for the life of me his name, once said, if not for the resources of Africa, France will simply be a medium rate European country. Until today, we've said it on this program, France is still collecting what is called colonial tax from its former African territories. So on what is it going to base the drive for French to become the language of the EU? It's not going to get anywhere with that. I'm absolutely sure of that. Even though the lady in Germany um, is leaving, but I don't see her successors, indulging Macron in that. I think it's making a play given the presidential election that is coming next year.
Prof, there's a question here in terms of the relationship between the UK and the United States. That given the challenges around Brexit and EU versus the UK and the increasing tensions there, do you see there being some tension between President Biden and Prime Minister Boris Johnson?
I do. Even though it will be covered up by words. I do. There was I was listening to a commentary by a former British ambassador to Washington, who in desperation had to say, well, if Biden can forgive the nasty things that Kamala Harris said about him during the Democratic primaries, he will get along with Boris Johnson. In other words, he should forgive Boris Johnson's the nasty things that Boris Johnson said about him. And I said to myself, you are getting quite desperate, mate, if you have to go that low to come up with something nice to say about the meeting between the two people. You've drawn attention to the substantive issues on which I don't see the two of them having friendly conversations. One is the issue that involves Northern Ireland. There is no way that Joe Biden is going to encourage Boris Johnson to jeopardize the Good Friday peace agreement, peace accord, for which the United States was very, very critical in coming up with that accord. No way. Number two is the issue of Brexit itself. Biden's language may be slightly different from that of Obama, but Biden was the vice president when Obama told the British, don't vote for Brexit. Don't expect the America to bail you out. And they resented that. They resented him coming to say that, even though their high commissioners and ambassadors go all around, Africa telling us how to vote and how not to vote. And they don't regard that as, interfering, in our own electoral process. So I don't see what help the Americans will come up with to try to bail Britain out of the economic mess it's found itself on Brexit. And on whatever issues that the EU and Britain are having, whether over fisheries or what have you, I don't see how America will end up on the UK side. So I'm afraid that, they said they are going to sign a new Atlantic Charter. Best of luck to both of them as regards what that charter will mean. I mean, when the first Atlantic Charter was signed, Europe was in ruins. Britain and to some limited extent, United Kingdom were on their feet at the end of the Second World War. But now Europe is not in ruins. So what was the Atlantic Charter between Britain and United Kingdom? I mean, between Britain and the United States. What's the significance of that?
Hmm. Prof, let's move to Africa. Let's start with Nigeria and then we go to Namibia. Um, we've seen this global issue around Twitter. Twitter deleted a tweet from the Nigerian president. And the Nigerian government has then banned Twitter in Nigeria. Subsequent to that, we've then seen former President Donald Trump support the Nigerian president. At the same time, we've seen President Biden now say that some of the social media platforms that had been banned under President Trump, he's now said the United States is going to review those things. Prof, can you help us understand the dynamic that is happening here? What's your take on this issue?
Before we started this evening session, you were telling me that we have viewers from some countries in Asia, some countries in Latin America, Canada, the United States, and some countries in Europe, as well, of course, as in Africa. So now that's about 6 continents or so that you drew my attention to. Therefore, I would like to handle this question of Twitter from a global perspective. You will recall that in the past 3 months or so, we have talked about what I regard as the recklessness and carelessness of not just the social media, but the Western media regarding problems, whether in Ethiopia or Myanmar or even Belarusia or what have you, where I have sought to draw attention of our viewers to what I call lack of understanding of the issues often that are at stake. And we've seen what I will call schoolboyish enthusiasm by journalists or commentators, whoever seems to be to have the loudest voice is what they then latch onto without seeking to understand the basic issues that probably led to problems and what have you. Take Ethiopia. Let me use that as an illustration, so I don't spend too much time talking theoretically. The Tigray movement for the past 30 years has been in governance in Ethiopia because they were then removed by the new government. They then started to talk about the Tigray people being marginalized. And their leaders then went on to lead them to attack an army base. I mean, there's no country in the world where a movement will attack an army base that the central government will not react. And yet you didn't get any of this background in the way the media was covering the issue. So I find the same problem with Twitter. What I would like to see is not only Twitter, but Facebook and what have you, having an oversight board made up of scholars from scholars who are globalists and not simply regard the media as an avenue, not only just to make money, but to make noise, following whoever is making the loudest noise possible. Because invariably, you are just as guilty. I'm talking now about the media. You are just as guilty as the leaders of these people who then disappear into neighboring countries or into the mountains, leaving their people exposed now to what? To the not too tender masses of forces of the central government, whether it's in Myanmar or Ethiopia or what have you. That is the way I think we should be talking about this, rather than localize it, where that may lead us to nowhere. I think even in dealing with Trump, you recall they then had to set up, I don't know what they called it, an oversight board to advise them as to whether they dealt with Trump by removing Trump, whether that was the right move or not. But how many militias, American militias, still have access to Twitter, Facebook, etc., etc.? Now, if they could be doing that in the United States, where they are based, then when you go to the rest of the world, what's the rest of the world suffering from the illiteracy? And I'm sorry to use such a strong word, but it is illiteracy. When you say you didn't know that one of your subscribers was a head of state, I mean, it's insulting, isn't it?
Prof, there's a question here. Someone is saying that clearly, seems that there is an issue between media outlets and national security. And where do you draw the line between these issues? When do you say that the media has crossed the line and you now represent a national security issue?
Well, I don't have an answer to that, and I wouldn't want to use my personal judgment. That's why I'm suggesting a global oversight board, because this is a very important issue. You are quite right that we don't want a dictatorship by the media and leave the judgment to the media. We want a free atmosphere to discuss ideas, but at the same time, where does the freedom to discuss ideas start and you're not yelling fire in a crowded cinema begin? I mean, that's the danger actually, which the American Supreme Court, that was this language, that your right to expression does not extend to yelling fire in a crowded cinema, because you know the consequences of that. There'll be a rush for the door. People will die. People will get marched over. all because you're exercising your right to free speech. And I think that's the kind of thing that, we will have to keep in mind where that balance is. But I wouldn't want it done by a particular government or done by a particular media outlet itself. That's why I'm suggesting a global, uh, panel, a global board made up of. Please keep that in mind, because I've often noticed when people say they are setting up a global board, it ends up being just Western scholars or Western ex-politicians. Whereas the issue that we're actually talking about, the danger we are talking about, is posed for developing countries as well.
Thank you for that analysis, Prof. Let's go to Namibia, where the German government has agreed to a 1.3 billion settlement as some sort of genocide deal. And some opposition politicians have pushed against that, and it has caused some tension in Namibia. What is your take on that situation, Prof?
If you don't mind, let me go 2-3 steps backwards. The events that happened in Namibia happened before the First World War. Europe, the United States, ignored what the Germans were doing in Namibia. Do you know that that's what laid the foundation for the genocide that Namibia perpetrated? That Germany perpetrated against the Jewish people in the Second World War. If Europe had taken cognizance of what the Germans did and immediately penalized them after they lost the First World War, we might have been spared the death of 6 million Jews in the Second World War. So I want to bring that to the attention of our viewers, that Namibia, the Herero people, were the laboratory specimen for what the Germans were to do later in the Second World War. Secondly, why has it taken so long for Germany to not only admit fault, but to have accepted to pay compensation for what they did? Why has it taken so long? Whereas the genocide perpetrated during the Second World War, they've been paying reparation. In fact, at the end of the First World War, if you look at the terms of the peace treaty, the Versailles Peace Treaty, Germany was going to pay reparation to France at the end of the First World War. And of course, at the end of the Second World War, they started to pay reparations to Israel. So why has it taken this long to admit fault, mea culpa, confession, and then pay reparation? I'm not even now going to talk about how much is one Herero life worth, and how much one Jewish life is worth in terms of the comparability of what they are offering the Herero people and what they have been paying Israel since the end of the Second World War. If we've now got to the stage where Germany has accepted fault, how about, and we've talked about this even on this program about 10, 15 minutes ago, how about the colonial tax, the inversion of genocide? France came to colonize Africa. A lot of people were killed in the process of colonizing Africa by France. And yet, it is Africa that is paying France what is called the colonial tax. France said that's what it cost it to colonize and run regimes in Africa. Then, how about the British colonization of its territories in Africa? How about the Belgians in the Congo, in Rwanda, in Burundi? How about that? What is the compensation? First of all, an admission that colonialism is or was genocide. I think we must lay down that basis, that foundation. Colonialism involved genocide. And we should be talking about reparations to African countries for what was done to them in the process of colonization. And finally, this issue has been on the burner. And a Nigerian politician who is dead now, MKO Abiola, decided to champion the question of reparation for the issue of slavery. I believe that the survivors of slavery in the United States, in Jamaica, Trinidad, all where they were taken, and including, don't forget, because we seem to forget this, genocide was involved in wiping out, quote unquote, slaves in Argentina and some of the Latin American countries, where today you won't find any Black people, whereas Black slaves were taken there. I think the survivors ought to be paid reparation. So what Germany has just done, I think, is the tip of the iceberg. I think it's just the creaking open of the window slightly, not even the door, for the whole of this issue of reparation, colonialism, slavery, and what have you.
Prof, before we leave that point, and I think I've asked you this question before, but I want to put it to you again. If we were on the side of the people who were colonizing, if we were on the side of the people who performed the genocide, some may say it wasn't us, it was our fathers, it was our grandfathers who did this. Some may say, when is my debt paid? How would you respond to that?
That's why I made a distinction between reparation in terms of its relationship to slavery, where the reparation should be paid to the survivors, to the descendants of the slaves, the African American, the Latin, the Afro-blacks, the Afro-blacks, whether in Cuba or in the West Indies, or even in the Arab countries, who don't want us to pay attention to mention their involvement in slavery. I've made a distinction between reparations paid to the descendants of slaves overseas and reparation paid for colonialism. I don't think we have any of our people that we could say was on the side of the colonial masters. Our leaders who resisted were either killed, hanged, or sent into exile. Jaja Fopobo fought against the British. The king of Benin Republic. There were Ashanti kings who fought against the colonial people and got dethroned. So I think we can make a conceptual distinction between slavery, of which we were involved, and therefore we could get part of the blame. And I'm not asking that African countries should be paid reparation for that, and colonialism, which we resisted and we got defeated because they had the guns and we had bows and arrows. And the Maxim gun determined who won and who lost.
Prof, thank you for that. There is one question I want to put to you before we close the program this evening, and that is the issue of Israel. Just a few weeks ago, we were talking about Israel, Gaza, what was going on between the two of them. Now, we have Israel firing into Syria. And they claim that they were targeting Hezbollah operatives. What do you have to say to that, Prof?
Netanyahu wants to go on a what? On a blaze of bombs and his usual typical thing. Whenever he finds himself in trouble, he's got to rake up some issue that allows him to send bombs flying into one place or the other. By Sunday, hopefully, we will see the political end of Netanyahu, and we will then have to worry as to what shenanigan he will get up to in order to, bail himself out of political trouble in which he may find himself. To me, I think this is the wrong time for Israel to send bombs into Syria, probably trying to upstage all the publicity that the G7 people are getting in London. But it's typical Netanyahu, typical.
All right, Prof. We've come to the end of the program this evening, but we want to say a big thank you to you because it's been 1 year that you have been on the program virtually almost every Thursday. We want to say a big thank you to you for your time. We want to say thank you for your wisdom. We want to say thank you for your knowledge on all these international affairs. We want to say a big thank you to you for this, Prof. We really appreciate you being here every Thursday, sharing your views with our viewers. It's really important. Thank you very much for that, Prof. And I've got my champagne.
I want to say thank you to you, Mr. Moderator, to our viewers who have stayed with us for the 52 weeks. Cheers.
Cheers, Prof. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back again next week for another interactive session. And bye for now.